This 4-year-old beggar girl finds a millionaire trapped in barbed wire, crying for help. But what she did shocked everyone. Please comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And become a member of my channel for access to exclusive videos. The scorching sun of Arizona beat mercilessly on the dusty streets of the small town of Sedona when Lily Thompson, a 4-year-old who looked barely 2 due to severe malnutrition, walked barefoot along the cracked sidewalk. Her tangled brown hair partially covered her thin face, where 2 large, bright eyes observed everything around her with a disturbing maturity for her age. The girl's stomach had been rumbling for 2 days. Since waking up on that park bench in Central Square, her routine had been the same. Searching for leftover food in the dumpsters behind restaurants, avoiding the pitying gazes of passers-by, and trying to remember the scent of her mother, Mary, who had disappeared 3 months ago without a trace. It was when she passed the vacant lot near the strip mall that the desperate cries reached her small ears. A man's cries, words she didn't fully understand, but that carried panic and despair. Lily cautiously approached, her bare feet making no sound on the dry earth. Behind a thorny bush, she hid and observed. There stood a tall man, elegant in appearance even amidst his despair. Adrian Sterling, 30 years old, possessed features reminiscent of the actors in the soap operas Lily sometimes managed to watch through the open windows of houses. Dark, well-cut hair, now disheveled, an angular face, and green eyes that reflected pure terror. His expensive clothes were torn by the barbed wire that held him like a cruel trap. "Help! Somebody help me!" he cried, trying to disentangle himself from the wires that cut his delicate skin. Blood stained his white dress shirt, and his manicured hands trembled as he desperately pulled at the fence that imprisoned him. Lily remained motionless, observing every movement, every expression of panic that crossed the man's face. There was something about this man that awakened her natural curiosity, an intuition she had developed during her months living on the streets. People constantly lied to her, promised help that never came, offered food in exchange for information she didn't have. The businessman continued to shout, but his voice began to weaken. The relentless midday sun made sweat run down his face as he fought against the metal wires that seemed to tighten even further with each jerky movement. His hands were already cut in several places, and small drops of blood fell on the parched earth. "Please," he murmured now, more to himself than expecting anyone to hear. "I can't stay here. He'll find me." The words reached Lily's keen ears clearly. He was running from someone. Just as she constantly fled from adults who wanted to put her in institutions, from shopkeepers who chased her away from their doors, from older children who tried to steal the few belongings she carried in a torn plastic bag. For almost 20 minutes, the girl watched the man's growing despair. She saw how he constantly looked over his shoulder as if expecting his pursuer to appear at any moment. She noticed how his hands trembled, not only from pain, but from genuine fear. It was a fear she knew well, the same one she felt every night when she lay down on the cold park bench, fearing that something terrible would happen before dawn. Finally, when Adrian seemed about to faint from exhaustion and dehydration, Lily came out from behind the bush. Her steps were silent, calculated. She approached slowly, studying each reaction of the injured man. "Did you do something bad?" she asked with her thin but firm voice. Adrian raised his green eyes, now glazed with pain, and met the girl's penetrating gaze. For a moment he was speechless. Here was a child who seemed even more lost than he was, but who watched him with an intensity that made him feel completely exposed. He began, but stopped. How could he explain to that innocent child that he had embezzled funds from public works? How could he tell her that the money destined to improve the living conditions of people like her had been used to increase his own fortune in risky stocks and investments? "I need help," he finally said, avoiding answering the direct question. Lily tilted her head slightly, a gesture she had learned by watching adults when they assessed whether someone was lying. First you answer. Did you do something bad? The simple question hit Adrian like a stab in the back. That hungry girl, who had clearly suffered abandonment and neglect, was standing before him asking for honesty, and he knew deep down that yes, he had done bad things. Many bad things. The sun continued relentlessly over their heads, and in the distance, the sound of car engines and human voices reminded them that life in the city continued normally, oblivious to the drama unfolding in that lot forgotten by God. Silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Adrian felt the blood slowly dripping from his wounds, while Lily's penetrating eyes studied him with an intensity that completely disarmed him. He had faced ruthless investors, negotiated millions in construction contracts, and commanded hundreds of employees. But he had never felt as vulnerable as at that moment before a 4-year-old girl who seemed to see straight into his soul. Yes, he murmured finally, lowering his gaze. I did bad things. Lily nodded slowly, as if that answer confirmed something she already suspected. During her months on the streets, she had developed a sixth sense for detecting lies. Adults constantly promised help that never came, offered food that never materialized, swore that everything would be all right when clearly it wouldn't. But there was something different about the broken voice of that well-dressed man. "Why are you running?" she asked, taking a step closer, but keeping enough distance to run if necessary. Adrian tried to adjust his position, but the barbed wire dug deeper into his skin. He groaned softly, closing his eyes for a moment before answering. A man who used to be my friend, found out about the bad things I did. He wants to hand me over to the authorities, but..." Adrian hesitated, realizing how pathetic his words sounded. "But he also did bad things. Worse than mine." Lily's large eyes narrowed slightly. She knew this dynamic well. Adults accusing other adults, each claiming to be less guilty than the other. It was like that when shopkeepers argued with each other about who had left garbage on the street, or when people argued about who should feed the abandoned children. "How do I know you won't hurt me if I help you?" she asked, crossing her thin arms over her chest. The question caught Adrian off guard. He really looked at the girl for the first time. Tangled hair, dirty and torn clothes, arms as thin as dry branches. She was a child who had clearly learned to distrust everyone, and rightly so. I promise I won't hurt you," he said, his voice softer. "You shouldn't be here alone. Where are your parents?" "My mom disappeared," Lily replied with the cruel naturalness of childhood. "It's been 3 months. People say she left, but I know she wouldn't leave me on purpose." Adrian's heart tightened. Even amidst his own despair, he managed to feel genuine compassion for that abandoned child. "And your father?" "Never had a father," Lily said, shrugging. "Just Mom, but now I don't have anyone anymore." The name hit Adrian like lightning. Mary. He knew a Mary Thompson, who had worked as a secretary in his company until a few months ago. A kind and dedicated woman who always arrived early and left late, who meticulously organized his files and never complained about the low salary. He vaguely remembered Robert Hayes, his former partner, commenting something about having to fire an employee due to budget cuts. "Mary Thompson?" he asked hesitantly. Lily's eyes widened. "You know my mom?" She worked at my company," Adrian said, feeling a wave of even greater guilt. "She was fired a few months ago. I didn't know she had a daughter." "Mom never talked about me at work," Lily explained, taking a few more steps closer. "She said it was to protect me from adults' problems." Adrian closed his eyes, processing the information. The daughter of one of his former employees was there, abandoned and hungry, while he had used the money that could have kept her job to speculate in the Bitcoin market and invest in risky stocks. The irony of the situation was too cruel to be coincidence. "I'll help you," Lily said suddenly, surprising him, "but only if you promise me one thing." "What?" "When you get out of this situation, you'll help me find my mom." Adrian looked into the girl's determined eyes and saw there a strength that contrasted drastically with her fragile appearance. It was an impossible proposal. He himself was running, injured and without resources. How could he promise to find a woman who had disappeared 3 months ago? "Lily," he said gently, "I don't know if I can save myself, let alone help you find your mom." "Then I won't help you," she replied simply, already preparing to leave. "Wait," he cried, feeling panicked. "Please don't leave me here." Lily stopped, turning to face him again. "Will you promise?" Adrian looked at that child who had lost everything, but still had enough hope to bargain for her mother. He thought about his own desperate situation, about Robert Hayes, who had certainly already discovered his escape and was organizing a search. He thought about the fortune he had accumulated through questionable means, the money kept in offshore accounts, the investments in digital currencies that no one knew existed. And then he thought about the possibility of dying there, trapped like an animal, while an innocent child he had helped to harm indirectly walked away. "I promise," he said finally. "I promise I'll help you find your mom." Lily studied his face for a long moment, her large eyes looking for signs of lying. Finally, she nodded and approached the barbed wire fence. "This is going to hurt," she warned, with the seriousness of an experienced surgeon. "But if you stay still, I can get you out of there." And with surprising care for a child her age, Lily began to work on the wires that held the man who had just made the most impossible promise of his life. Lily's small hands worked with impressive precision, bending and twisting the barbed wire in a way that Adrian would never have imagined possible. The girl had developed survival skills that most children her age would never need to learn. Each movement was calculated, deliberate, the result of months of observing, learning and adapting to the cruel circumstances of life on the streets. "Don't move," she murmured, focused on freeing his right arm from the tangle of metal. "My mum always said that when we panic, things get worse." Adrian tried to control his breathing as he felt the wires being carefully removed from his skin. With each movement of Lily, small cuts opened and closed, but gradually he felt more freedom of movement. Sweat ran down his face, mixing with the blood of minor cuts, and the thirst began to become almost unbearable under the relentless sun. "Ready," Lily said after 15 minutes of meticulous work. "Now get up slowly." Adrian moved carefully, testing each limb before trusting his weight on it. His expensive clothes were destroyed, turned into rags that barely covered the wounds. When he finally managed to stand, he looked at Lily with a mixture of gratitude and astonishment. "How did you learn to do that?" he asked, examining his own arms. "You learn a lot on the street," she replied simply. "Once a boy got stuck in a similar fence when he was trying to pick fruit. I saw how the adults got him out of there." Adrian then realized that he was looking at a child who had been forced to grow up much faster than she should have. Each word of Lily revealed experiences that no 4-year-old girl should have lived through. "Now you need to get out of here," she said, looking around with attentive eyes. "That man who's chasing you might show up any minute." "Robert," Adrian murmured, suddenly remembering the urgency of his situation. "He must be looking for me all over town." "What does he look like?" Lily asked. "Tall, grey hair, always wears a dark blue suit. There's a small scar on his forehead here," Adrian said, pointing to his own forehead. "Why?" Lily's eyes widened slightly. "I know that man. I saw him arguing with another man in Central Square a few days ago. They were yelling about money and papers." The first small twist hit Adrian like a punch in the stomach. Robert had been in town for days, looking for him, organizing his capture. This meant that his escape had been discovered much earlier than he had imagined. "What else did you hear?" he asked urgently. "The man in the blue suit was talking about finding someone who had run away with money from their company. He said he was going to offer a reward to anyone who gave information." Adrian felt the blood run cold in his veins. Robert wasn't just looking for him, he was manipulating the situation, painting him as the only one guilty of the company's problems. The local population, always suspicious of the rich, would certainly embrace the opportunity to hunt down a corrupt businessman. "I need to hide," he murmured, more to himself than to Lily. "I know a place," she said immediately, "but it's far from here, and you're hurt. Any place will do. Where to?" Lily pointed beyond the low buildings of the town, towards a more distant area where some old buildings mixed with empty lots. "There's a shed there. Nobody goes there, because they say it's haunted, but I've slept there a few nights when it was too cold in the square." Adrian looked in the indicated direction, calculating the distance. It would be at least 2 kilometers of walking, much of it in open ground where they could be easily seen, but he had no choice. "Can you show me the way?" "I can, but we have to go by a path that nobody uses. It will take longer, but it's safer." They began the walk, Lily in front, guiding him through narrow alleys and little-known paths that she had mapped during her months of survival on the streets. The girl moved with the confidence of someone who knew every stone, every hole, every available hiding place. During the journey, Adrian had time to better observe his little guide. Lily spoke little, but when she did, her words were always precise and full of meaning. She stopped frequently to look around, checking if they were being followed, and always chose the safest path, even if it was longer. "Why are you helping me?" he asked when they stopped to rest in the shade of a tree. Lily was silent for a moment, playing with a twig she had found on the ground. "Because you knew my mom, and because you promised to help me find her." "What if I can't keep the promise?" The girl's large eyes fixed on his. "You will. You have to." The unwavering faith in her voice touched something deep in Adrian's heart. When was the last time someone had shown so much confidence in him? Certainly not in recent years, when his personal and professional relationships had been based more on mutual interest than on genuine trust. When they finally arrived at the shed, the sun was already beginning to decline on the horizon. The building was old, probably abandoned for decades, with a partially collapsed roof and walls covered in vegetation. But it was structurally sound and offered protection from both the elements and prying eyes. "Here," Lily said, pushing open a side door that creaked on its rusted hinges. "You can go in." The interior was dark and smelled of mold, but there was a corner where natural light still came in through an opening in the roof. Some old boxes and pieces of wood were scattered on the floor, remnants of some long-forgotten industrial activity. "It's not much, but it's safe," Lily said, observing Adrian's reaction. He looked around the space that would be his refuge for the next few days, maybe weeks. From the man who slept in imported silk sheets and woke up overlooking the Arizona mountains from his luxurious penthouse, he had become a fugitive, sheltering in an abandoned shed with the help of a hungry child. "It's perfect," he said sincerely. "Thank you, Lily. I'll bring food tomorrow," she promised, "and water, but now I need to go back before it gets dark." "Wait," Adrian called as she headed for the door. "How can I be sure you'll come back?" Lily turned around, and for the first time since they met, she gave something resembling a smile. "Because you promised to help me find my mom, and I always keep my promises." With those words, she disappeared into the growing darkness, leaving Adrian alone with his thoughts, his wounds, and the growing awareness that his life had changed forever. The first night in the shed was a torment of physical pain and mental anguish. Adrian settled as best he could on some cardboard boxes he found, using his torn jacket as a pillow. Every movement awakened a new pang of pain in the wounds caused by the barbed wire, and the thirst became increasingly unbearable. But worse than the physical discomfort was the torrent of thoughts that invaded his mind in the darkness. How had he reached this point? He who possessed a fortune accumulated through careful investments in the stock market, who kept a significant portion of his assets in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, now depended on the help of an abandoned child to survive. The man who once dreamed of building a business empire that would generate jobs and development for his native region had become a fugitive, hidden in an abandoned shed. The first signs that something was wrong in his partnership with Robert had emerged almost a year ago. small inconsistencies in financial reports, contracts that were signed without his full approval, meetings from which he was deliberately excluded. But Adrian had chosen to ignore the signs, too focused on expanding his personal investments and increasing his capital through risky speculation in the market. When he finally decided to investigate more deeply, he discovered that Robert had created a complex network of overbilling on public works. The extra money wasn't just being embezzled, it was being used to finance other unauthorized projects, creating a web of irregularities involving suppliers, subcontractors, and even some local public officials. The cruel irony was that Adrian, although he wasn't the mastermind of the scheme, had benefited from it indirectly. Part of the inflated profits had been used to pay his dividends as a partner, money that he had readily reinvested in his personal investments without questioning its origin. Technically, he was an involuntary beneficiary, but morally, he knew he was as guilty as Robert. The sound of soft footsteps woke him from his tortuous thoughts. Lily had returned, moving silently through the darkness with an impressive skill. She carried a crumpled plastic bag and a half-empty water bottle. "I got bread and some fruit," she whispered, approaching, "and some water from the fountain in the square." Adrian sat up with difficulty, gratefully accepting the food. The bread was stale, probably leftovers from some bakery the day before, but to him, at that moment, it was a feast. As he ate, he watched Lily settle in a nearby corner, her large eyes shining in the dim light. "You shouldn't be here," he said between bites. "It's dangerous for a child to walk alone at night." "I always walk alone at night," she replied simply. "During the day, there are too many people on the street, and some adults try to grab me to take me to places I don't want to go." The second small twist came when Lily revealed something that made Adrian's heart stop for a moment. "You know where I always sleep?" she asked casually. "Where?" "On the park bench in Central Square. Right in front of that pretty monument that has writing about family and values on it." Adrian almost choked on the piece of bread he was chewing. That monument had been built by his company 2 years ago as part of a revitalization project of the square. He himself had suggested the inscription engraved in bronze, "Dedicated to the families who build our community with love and solid values." A hypocritical proclamation, considering that the money used in the project had been diverted from other social programs. You sleep there every night?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Almost every night. It's the safest place I've found. There's a light that stays on all night, and people pass by there early in the morning, so there's not as much danger." The irony of the situation hit Adrian with devastating force. The abandoned child who was now helping him slept every night in front of a monument that his own company had erected using embezzled money. It was as if the universe was conspiring to show him the consequences of his actions in a cruel and poetic way. "Lily," he said hesitantly, "do you remember anything else about your mom? About when she disappeared?" The girl was quiet for a long moment, nervously playing with the strap of the plastic bag. "She was very sad in the last few weeks before she disappeared. She cried when she thought I wasn't watching." "Did she say anything about work?" "She said she had lost her job, but that she would find another one. She said she was going to do something to get money for both of us." Lily paused, her eyes fixing on Adrian's. "Do you know why she was fired?" Adrian felt the weight of guilt pressing his chest like a gigantic stone. He knew exactly why Mary had been fired. Robert had claimed the need to cut costs, and Adrian had agreed without questioning, too focused on his own investments to worry about the fate of an employee. "There were cuts at the company," he said evasively. "Several people lost their jobs." "My mom was a good worker," Lily said firmly. "She always arrived early and left late. She took care of me and still managed to do everything right at work." "I'm sure she was." "Then why did you fire her?" The simple and direct question of Lily cut through all the justifications and rationalizations that Adrian had built. Why had they fired Mary? Because it was easier to cut employees than to reduce the profits of the partners. Because it was more convenient to fire honest and hard-working people than to investigate where the money was really being spent. Because I was a coward, he said finally, the words coming out almost without him realizing it. Because I didn't pay attention to what really mattered. Lily nodded slowly, as if that answer made more sense than any technical explanation about business economics. When you help me find my mum, are you going to apologize to her? I will, Adrian promised, and for the first time since he had met her, he felt that he was making a promise that he really intended to keep. They spent the rest of the night talking in whispers. Lily told about her life on the streets, about the people who sometimes helped her, and those who hurt her, about the dreams she had with her mother, and the hope that one day she would return. Adrian, in turn, found himself sharing memories of his own childhood, when he still dreamed of using his wealth to help people instead of just accumulating it. When the first ray of sunshine began to enter through the opening in the roof, Lily prepared to leave. I'll be back this afternoon, she said. But I need to find out more about that man who's looking for you. What kind of things? If he really offered a reward, how many people are looking for you? If anyone suspects you're hiding around here? Adrian watched her walk away, admiring the strategic intelligence of that 4-year-old child. Lily had instinctively understood that information was power and that they needed to know exactly what they were dealing with to survive. As she disappeared into the nascent morning, Adrian allowed himself a moment of hope. Perhaps, with the unlikely help of that extraordinary girl, he could not only escape from Robert, but also find a way to redeem at least part of the mistakes he had made. Throughout that day, Adrian remained in the shed, alternating between moments of despair and periods of feverish planning. Thirst tormented him constantly, and the wounds began to swell, signs of possible infection. But his mind worked non-stop, trying to find a way out of the trap he was in. Around 3 in the afternoon, Lily returned, but her expression was darker than the night before. She brought with her a larger bottle of water and some crackers, but her small hands trembled slightly as she approached. I have bad news, she said bluntly, sitting on the dusty floor of the shed. Adrian felt his stomach clench. What happened? The man in the blue suit, Robert, was in the square this morning. He brought posters with your picture on them. My picture? Yes. And he's offering $5,000 to whoever says where you are. The first medium twist hit Adrian like a hammer. $5,000 was a significant amount for the residents of a small town in Arizona. It was more than many people earned in months of work. Robert had turned the entire population into potential bounty hunters. There's more, Lily continued, nervously playing with the cap of the water bottle. He told people that you ran away with a lot of money from the company, that because of that, several employees are going to lose their jobs. That's a lie, Adrian protested. I didn't steal money from the company. I know it's a lie, Lily said calmly. Because I saw things that other people didn't see. What kind of things? Lily's large eyes fixed on his with a disturbing intensity. I remember everything I see. I always have. My mom said I had a special memory. Adrian leaned forward, intrigued. What do you mean? When people talk to me, I remember all the words. When I see something, it stays in my head like a photograph. That's why I could find places and people for my mom when she needed to. Lily began to recount, with frightening accuracy, conversations she had witnessed in recent weeks as she wandered the streets. She remembered specific details about locations, times, people involved, as if she were a little unconscious detective. 3 weeks ago, I was picking up food behind Mr. Johnson's restaurant when I saw Robert talking to a fat man with a mustache. The fat man was angry, saying he didn't receive the full payment for a project. Robert said the problem was because of you, that you were messing up the business. Do you remember exactly what they said? I remember everything. The fat man said, Robert, if Adrian is suspicious, we need to take care of him before he finds out about the whole scheme. and Robert replied, "Relax, Gerald. I'm already arranging a way to get him out of the picture." Adrian's blood ran cold. Gerald was one of the company's main suppliers, someone he had considered reliable for years. Discovering that he was conspiring with Robert was like taking a punch in the stomach, but even worse was realizing that his life had been in danger for weeks without him knowing it. "There are more things," Lily continued, her childish voice contrasting strangely with the seriousness of the information she revealed. "2 weeks ago, I saw Robert entering the building where my mum worked, but it was Sunday. Nobody works there on Sunday." "Are you sure?" "I am. I was sleeping under the stairs of the building across the street because it was raining a lot. I saw him enter with a key, stay inside for more than an hour, and leave carrying a large box." The third small twist crystallized in Adrian's mind. Robert had used Sunday to remove evidence from the office, probably documents that would prove his guilt in the overbilling scheme. This explained why, when Adrian finally decided to investigate the irregularities, he found so few compromising papers. "Lily, could you take me to specific places in the city without anyone seeing us?" "I can. I know all the paths that people don't use." "Why?" "Because I need to recover some documents. And you may be the only person who can help me do it." The girl was silent for a moment, processing the request. "Is it dangerous?" "Very dangerous. And will it help us find my mum?" Adrian hesitated. The truth was that he didn't know if getting the documents would help him find Mary, but he knew that without them he would never be able to prove his partial innocence or expose Robert's real crimes. "I think so," he said finally. "If I can prove that Robert is the real culprit, maybe I can find out what really happened to your mom. Then I'll help you." "Lily, you're only 4 years old. This is too dangerous for a child." "I'm not just 4 years old," she said with a seriousness that made Adrian shiver. "I have 4 years of life, but many more of experience." The phrase, said with the cruel simplicity of childhood, revealed a painful truth. Lily had been forced to grow far beyond her chronological age. Life on the streets, hunger, abandonment, everything had conspired to create a child with abilities and knowledge that no girl should possess. "Where do you want to go get the documents?" she asked pragmatically. "In my office. But it's impossible. Robert has certainly put someone to watch the building." "Not during the night," Lily said thoughtfully. "And there's a way to get in that almost nobody knows." "How do you know?" "Because I've been there before." Adrian stared at her, surprised. "How?" "When my mom still worked there, sometimes I waited for her to finish work. Once she took too long, and I was hungry, so I went in to look for her. There's a window in the back that doesn't close properly, and you can climb up to it using the water pipes." The second medium twist began to form in Adrian's mind. Lily knew the company building better than he imagined. More than that, she had developed movement and observation skills that could be crucial to recovering the documents he needed. "If I can get the right papers," he said slowly, "I can prove that Robert forged the documents that incriminate me, and maybe find out what he did to the employees who were unfairly fired, including my mom, including your mom." Lily nodded decisively. "Then let's go tonight." "No, it's too risky." "You promised to help me find my mom," she said, standing up and walking to the opening of the shed from where she could see the city. "I'm helping you hide, bringing you food, giving you information. Now it's your turn to do your part." Adrian watched that tiny girl silhouetted against the afternoon light. At 4 years old, Lily already understood the concept of reciprocity better than many adults he had negotiated with throughout his life. She had kept every promise she had made, risking her own safety to help him. How could he deny her the chance to find out what had happened to her mother? "All right," he said finally, "but we do it my way. Any sign of danger, we get out of there immediately." "Deal," Lily replied, turning to him with a smile that mixed childish determination and premature wisdom. "Let's find out the truth." At that moment, Adrian realized that he had crossed an irreversible line. He wasn't just trying to save his own skin anymore. He was embarking on a mission that could be dangerous for both of them, motivated both by the need to clear his name and by the growing desire to help that extraordinary child find her mother. The darkness of the early morning enveloped Adrian and Lily like a protective cloak as they moved silently through the deserted streets of the town. The girl led the way with an impressive confidence, choosing narrow alleys and passages that seemed invisible to the untrained eye. Each step was calculated, each stop strategic, the result of months of experience navigating the forgotten corners of that small Arizona town. "This way," Lily whispered, pointing to a side alley that ran behind the commercial building where Adrian's company operated. "There's less light and nobody passes through here after midnight." Adrian followed her, still amazed by the precision of the child's movements. His own wounds protested with each step, and the tension made his heart beat erratically. But Lily seemed perfectly comfortable in that nocturnal environment she knew like the palm of her little hand. When they arrived at the back of the building, the reality of the situation hit Adrian with full force. There he was, a businessman who had once commanded hundreds of employees and moved millions in contracts, about to break into his own office like a common thief, guided by a 4-year-old girl who lived on the streets. "The window is that one there," Lily said, pointing to the second floor. "Can you climb up the pipes?" Adrian looked up, assessing the distance and available supports. The water pipes ran along the outer wall of the building, offering a precarious but possible route to reach the faulty window that Lily had discovered. "I'll try," he murmured, testing the resistance of the first pipe. "Wait," Lily said, holding his arm. "Let me go first. I'm lighter, and if something goes wrong, you can help me from below." "Absolutely not," Adrian protested. "You're a child. I'm not going to let you risk yourself like that." "I've climbed this wall before," she insisted. "You haven't. And if you fall, you'll make noise and attract attention. If I fall, you catch me." Lily's cruel but efficient logic was irrefutable. She knew the building, had experience in improvised climbs, and really was much lighter than him. Even so, Adrian felt nauseous at the idea of allowing a child to run such a risk. "If you feel like you're going to fall, let me know immediately," he said finally. "And if someone shows up, you come down right away." Lily nodded and began to climb with an agility that left Adrian speechless. Her small feet found supports in the smallest reliefs of the wall. Her hands clung to the pipes with a security born of experience. In less than 3 minutes, she was at the height of the second-floor window. "The window is open," she whispered down. "I'm going to go in and open the back door for you." "Be careful," Adrian murmured, watching her disappear through the opening. The minutes that followed were the longest of his life. Every sound of the street made him jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential danger. Finally, he heard the soft noise of the back door being unlocked, and Lily appeared in the entrance. "I did it," she said simply, as if breaking into buildings was the most natural thing in the world. They entered quickly, and Adrian felt a strange mixture of familiarity and strangeness to be back in his work environment. The office was exactly as he remembered it, but now it seemed like a hostile territory full of bitter memories and decisions he wished he could undo. "Where are the papers you need?" Lily asked, keeping her voice low. "In my office, in the safe behind the desk." They silently climbed the stairs, Adrian guiding the way through the corridors he knew by heart. When they reached the door of his office, he hesitated for a moment. What if Robert had changed the locks? What if there was some kind of alarm he didn't know about? But the door opened normally, revealing the space that had been his second home for years. His solid wood executive desk, the shelves full of reports and contracts, the photographs of the works carried out by the company, everything remained untouched, as if it were waiting for his return. "The safe is behind the painting," he said to Lily, pointing to a landscape painting that decorated the wall. While Adrian worked on the combination of the safe, Lily explored the office with childish curiosity. She delicately touched the objects on the table, observed the photographs on the walls, absorbing every detail, with her natural photographic memory. "Here," she said suddenly, pointing to a framed photograph. "That's my mom." Adrian turned around and saw Lily watching a photo of the company team, taken during an end-of-year party 2 years ago. There was Mary, smiling shyly among the other employees, wearing a simple but elegant dress that she had probably bought especially for the occasion. "She was happy that day," Lily said, touching the glass of the frame. "She came home saying that you had given a Christmas bonus to everyone." Guilt hit Adrian once again. He vaguely remembered that bonus, which he had approved without thinking much, too focused on calculating his own year-end dividends. For him, it had been just another operating expense. But for Mary and her daughter, it had probably meant being able to buy decent food and maybe some Christmas presents. The safe finally opened, revealing piles of documents organized in folders. Adrian began looking for the specific papers he needed: original contracts, correspondence with suppliers, financial reports that could prove his allegations about Robert's scheme. It was when his fingers touched a folder that he didn't remember having stored there that the third medium twist exploded before him. The folder was identified with the name Mary Thompson, Employment Situation, and contained documents he had never seen before. "Lily," he called, his voice trembling. "Come see this." The girl approached as Adrian opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside there was a resignation letter that had definitely not been written by Mary. The handwriting was clearly someone else's, and the content was too formal for someone with the employee's limited education. There was also a receipt for an amount of money that had supposedly been paid as compensation, but Adrian knew that he had never authorized such payment. "My mom couldn't write well," Lily said, studying the letter. "She always asked me to read the difficult things for her." "This letter is fake," Adrian murmured, examining the documents. "Robert forged your mother's resignation." "Why?" Adrian continued examining the papers, and the truth began to unfold before him like a terrible painting. There were handwritten notes, in Robert's unmistakable handwriting, about problematic employee and risk of exposure. There were also references to conversations that Mary would have heard and questions that she would have raised about irregularities in the contracts. "Your mother found out something," he said slowly. "She discovered the scheme and tried to report it. Robert fired her to silence her." "Then where is she now?" Lily asked, her small voice full of hope and fear. Adrian continued searching the documents and found something that made his blood run cold. It was a bank transfer receipt, dated 2 weeks after Mary's supposed dismissal. A significant amount had been transferred to an account in her name, but to a bank in a town more than 200 kilometers away. "Lily," he said carefully, "I don't think your mother disappeared. I think she was forced to leave." "What do you mean?" "Robert paid her to leave town and stay quiet about what she found out. But the payment is still being made monthly. Look here," he said, showing a series of bank transfers. "This means she's still alive, and Robert knows exactly where she is." Lily's eyes filled with tears, the first that Adrian had seen her shed since they met. "My mom is alive?" "She's alive, and she's probably waiting for you." It was at that moment that they heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps in the hallway downstairs. Someone had entered the building and was climbing the stairs towards the office where they were. Adrian and Lily looked at each other, panic reflecting in their eyes. They had discovered crucial information about Mary's whereabouts, but now they were trapped in the very place where they shouldn't be, with someone approaching quickly and no safe escape route in sight. The footsteps in the hallway drew closer and closer, echoing in the silence of the early morning like war drums. Adrian took Lily by the hand and pulled her towards the window that faced the back of the building, but before they could reach it, a familiar female voice made them stop. "Adrian, Adrian Sterling, is that really you?" The voice belonged to Sylvia Rodriguez, 58 years old, who had been the company's administrative supervisor for more than 15 years until she was fired 3 months ago. Adrian knew her as a meticulous and honest woman. who always arrived at work before everyone else and left last, checking every detail of the financial reports. "Ms. Rodriguez?" Adrian replied hesitantly, slowly coming out from behind the desk. "What are you doing here?" The woman appeared at the door of the office, carrying a small flashlight and a worn cloth bag. Her grey hair was tied in a simple bun, and she wore dark clothes that helped her move unnoticed in the darkness. When she saw Lily next to Adrian, her eyes widened in surprise. "My God, what child is this? And why are you here in the middle of the night?" "It's a long story," Adrian said. "But first, tell me what you're doing here." "Miss..." Rodriguez hesitated for a moment, then sighed heavily. "The same thing as you, I imagine, looking for evidence of what really happened in this company. Do you know about Robert's scheme?" "I know much more than I should know," she replied bitterly. "And that's why I was fired, because I started asking inconvenient questions about the reports that didn't add up." Lily, who had remained quiet watching the conversation, took a step forward. "Do you know my mum? Mary Thompson." "Ms." Rodriguez's eyes softened as she looked at the girl. "Mary? Of course, I know her. We worked together for 2 years, but..." She paused, looking from Lily to Adrian. "Don't tell me this is Mary's daughter? The little Lily she always talked about?" "That's me," the girl said simply, "and I'm looking for my mom." "My God," Ms. Rodriguez murmured, kneeling to be at Lily's height. "Girl, what are you doing on the street? Where's your mother?" "She disappeared 3 months ago," Adrian explained quickly, "but we just discovered that Robert forced her to leave town to silence her about what she had discovered." Ms. Rodriguez was silent for a long moment, processing the information. Then, slowly, an expression of understanding and anger took over her face. "That bastard," she murmured. "I knew there was something strange about the way Mary disappeared. She was investigating the same irregularities as me, but she was more discreet about it." "What do you mean?" Adrian asked. "Mary had access to the correspondence files. She started noticing that some supplier letters mentioned different values than those that appeared in our internal reports. When she came to me to talk about it, I told her to be careful." The fourth medium twist began to form. Ms. Rodriguez opened her bag and pulled out a folder full of photocopied documents. "During these last few weeks, I've been coming here at night to collect evidence. I have a copy of the keys, because Robert forgot to ask for mine back when he fired me." She smiled bitterly. Typical of him, always negligent with important details. "What kind of evidence?" Adrian asked, examining the papers she was handing him. "Original contracts that show the real values, negotiated with suppliers, emails printed before Robert could delete them, and mainly this," she said, taking a sealed envelope from the folder. "Letters that Mary gave me 2 weeks before she disappeared, with instructions to open them only if something happened to her." Lily approached, her large eyes fixed on the envelope. "Are those letters from my mom?" "They are, my dear. Your mother was smarter than anyone imagined. She knew she was in danger." Ms. Rodriguez carefully opened the envelope and removed 2 handwritten sheets. The handwriting was simple, clearly from someone with basic education, but the words were direct and courageous. "If you're reading this, it means something bad has happened to me," Ms. Rodriguez read aloud. "I discovered that Robert Hayes has been stealing money from the company for over 2 years. I have copies of documents that prove this. I also discovered that he is blackmailing some suppliers to keep silent about the overbilling." Adrian felt his legs weaken. "She had proof of everything?" "Listen to this," Ms. Rodriguez continued. "If something happens to me, please take care of my daughter Lily. She is all I have in the world, and please tell Mr. Sterling that he is not guilty of the worst things. Robert did everything behind his back. I saw the papers being forged after Mr. Sterling signed the originals." Tears ran down Lily's face, but this time they were tears of hope mixed with longing. "My mom wrote this." "She did, my dear. And there's more," Ms. Rodriguez said, turning the page. "I hid copies of all the important documents in a place that only Lily knows." I always played with her to hide treasures, and she has an incredible memory. If they ask her about the place where Mom kept the most important things, she will know." Lily straightened up suddenly, her eyes shining with recognition. "I know where it is. I know where my mom hid the things." "Where?" Adrian and Ms. Rodriguez asked at the same time. "In our apartment, there was a hole in the wall behind the old stove. My mom always played at hiding small presents there for me to find. She said it was our secret safe." Ms. Rodriguez smiled for the first time since she arrived. Mary was always smart. Even with little formal education, she understood people better than anyone. "But how are we going to get to the apartment?" Adrian asked. "At this point, Robert has probably already searched the place." "Actually, no," Ms. Rodriguez said thoughtfully. "I found out that Robert never knew where Mary really lived. She always gave the address of a friend on the company forms to protect Lily from any work-related problems." "So the documents may still be there?" Lily asked, barely able to contain her emotion. "It's very possible, but we have to go now, before someone finds out we're here." It was at that moment that they heard a noise outside, the unmistakable sound of cars stopping on the street in front of the building. Through the window, they could see two figures getting out of a dark vehicle and heading towards the main entrance. "Robert," Adrian whispered, recognizing the tall silhouette and the authoritarian movements of his former partner. "How did he know we were here?" Ms. Rodriguez asked, quickly turning off the flashlight. "It doesn't matter now," Adrian said. "We need to get out of here immediately." But as they headed towards the stairs, they heard voices coming from the ground floor. Robert had entered the building, and from their conversation, it was clear that he knew exactly where to look. "They're going to check all the offices," they heard Robert's voice echoing through the empty hallway. "If they were here, they'll have left some trace." Adrian, Lily, and Ms. Rodriguez were trapped on the second floor, with Robert and at least one other person blocking their only known escape route. The back window was still an option, but getting down through it with a 4-year-old child and a woman of almost 60 years would be extremely risky. "This way," Lily whispered suddenly, pulling them towards a door that Adrian hadn't even noticed. "There's another way." "How do you know?" Ms. Rodriguez asked. "Because I explored this whole building while waiting for my mom to finish work," Lily replied with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of that place. "Trust me." And once again, little Lily became the unlikely leader of a group of desperate adults, guiding them through the darkness towards an uncertain salvation, carrying with her the only clues that could lead them both to the truth about Robert's scheme and to the whereabouts of her missing mother. Lily led them through a narrow corridor that led to a service staircase that Adrian had never noticed in all his years working in that building. The girl moved with the security of someone who had explored every corner of that place during the long hours of waiting for her mother, turning a commercial building into her personal playground. "Here," she whispered, opening a door that led to the adjacent roof. "We can jump to the building next door and go down the fire escape." Ms. Rodriguez looked at the distance between the two roofs with apprehension. "Girl, that must be more than 6 feet across." "I've jumped it several times," Lily said naturally. "It's easier than it looks." Adrian examined the distance and the precarious state of the roof of the neighboring building. It was risky, but with Robert and his henchmen searching the floor below, there weren't many options. The sound of doors being opened and closed reached them, indicating that the search was intensifying. "I'll go first," he said. "If I make it, I'll help you two from the other side." The jump was scarier than he expected, but he managed to land safely on the neighboring roof. Ms. Rodriguez came next, with Adrian holding her hands to make sure she didn't slip. Finally, Lily jumped with a naturalness that made the two adults realize how much that child had adapted to dangerous situations. 20 minutes later, they were walking through the empty streets towards the neighborhood where Mary and Lily had lived. It was a poorer area of town, with simple houses and poorly lit streets, but Lily led the way with the confidence of someone who was finally returning home. "It's that one there," she said, pointing to a small 2-story house. with peeling paint and windows protected by old bars. We lived in the apartment upstairs. "How are we going to get in?" Ms. Rodriguez asked. "Surely someone has already rented the apartment to other people." "Actually, no," Lily said. "Mrs. Davis, the owner, said she was going to wait for my mum to come back. She liked Mum a lot." Lily led them to a side window on the ground floor and knocked gently on the glass. After a few minutes, an elderly woman appeared, opening the curtain carefully. When she recognized Lily, her face lit up with joy and concern. "Lily, my girl, where have you been? I've been looking for you for weeks," Mrs. Davis said, quickly opening the window. "Hi, Mrs. Davis. These are my friends." "Can we go up to Mum's apartment? It's very important." The owner looked suspiciously at Adrian and Ms. Rodriguez, but Lily's gentle insistence eventually convinced her. "All right, but be quiet. I don't want problems with the neighbors." The apartment where Mary and Lily had lived was small but cozy, simple but well cared for furniture, photographs of the mother and daughter scattered on the walls, and the characteristic smell of a house that had been a true home. Lily moved through the space with a mixture of joy and sadness, touching familiar objects as if they were sacred treasures. "The secret safe is in the kitchen," she said, heading towards an old stove leaning against the wall. "Mom always said it was our private bank." Ms. Rodriguez and Adrian watched as Lily bent down and began to examine the wall behind the stove. Her small fingers found an imperfection in the plaster that seemed natural, but that actually hid a small opening. "Here," she said triumphantly, carefully removing some loose bricks. "Mom hid our most important things here." From the hole in the wall, Lily pulled out a plastic envelope that contained several sheets of paper, some photographs, and a small notebook. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw a photo of her with her mother, taken a few days before Mary's disappearance. "These are the documents that my mother mentioned in the letter," Ms. Rodriguez said, examining the papers. "Original contracts, correspondence with suppliers, and, my God, this is a bombshell." Adrian looked over her shoulder and saw a series of photographs that showed Robert in secret meetings with men he recognized as public works inspectors and representatives of competing companies. The photos had been taken from afar, probably by Mary during her lunch hours or at the end of the workday. "How did your mother get these photos?" he asked Lily. "Mom always said that she had to pay attention to the strange things. When she started to suspect something, she started following some important people at the company." In the small notebook, they found meticulous notes made by Mary, documenting suspicious meetings, discrepant values, and conversations she had managed to overhear. Despite her limited education, she had built a solid case against Robert, collecting evidence for months. "Look at this," Ms. Rodriguez said, pointing to an entry in the notebook. "Robert offered me money to keep quiet about what I discovered. Said that if I spoke, he would make up that I was stealing office supplies. I'm afraid for what might happen to Lily if I don't accept." The first major twist crystallized before them. Mary hadn't simply disappeared. She had been blackmailed and forced to leave town to protect her daughter. Robert had used maternal love as a weapon to silence her. "There's more," Ms. Rodriguez continued, reading a later entry. "Robert said he got me a job in another city, far from here. I'll have to leave Lily temporarily until I can send for her. He promised that if I left town and stayed quiet for a year, I could come back. I have no choice." Lily sobbed as she heard her mother's words. "She didn't abandon me. She was forced to leave." "And there's information about where she is," Adrian said, examining a paper with addresses and phone numbers. "Mary is working in a textile factory in Greenville. Robert arranged the job to keep her away and watched." "Can we go get her?" Lily asked, her tears mixing hope with anxiety. "First, we need to expose Robert," Ms. Rodriguez said pragmatically. "If we simply go get your mother, he can do something to harm you both even more." It was at that moment that they heard the sound of cars stopping on the street. Through the kitchen window, they could see two familiar silhouettes getting out of a dark vehicle. Robert Hayes and the same man who had accompanied him in the company building. "How did he find us?" Adrian murmured. "Mrs. Davis must have told someone you were here," Ms. Rodriguez said, "or Robert put someone to watch this place." They heard footsteps on the outside staircase that led to the upper apartment. Robert had discovered where they were, and now he was approaching for a final confrontation. But this time they had something he didn't expect. All the evidence necessary to expose his crimes and discover the truth about Mary's disappearance. "You two get out through the kitchen window," Adrian said quickly. "I'll face Robert." "No," Lily said with surprising firmness. "We do this together. My mom faced him alone and was forced to leave. Now there are three of us, and we have proof of everything he did." "Lily, you're a child." "I'm a child who knows the truth," she interrupted, carefully putting the documents and photographs back in the plastic envelope. "And my mom always said that the truth is stronger than any lie." The sound of a key turning in the lock alerted them that there was no more time for discussion. Robert had gained access to the apartment, and the final confrontation was about to begin. But for the first time since it all began, Adrian felt that they had a real chance of winning. The apartment door opened with an ominous creak, and Robert Hayes entered with the arrogant confidence of someone who believed he held all the cards. At 45 years old, he maintained the imposing posture he had cultivated during decades of dubious business dealings, but his eyes revealed the tension of someone who knew he was reaching the limit of his lies. "Adrian," he said with a cold smile, observing the trio grouped in the small kitchen, "I finally found you. And I see you've brought company." Behind him entered Gerald Santos, the corpulent supplier that Lily had seen talking to Robert weeks ago. His small eyes swept the apartment with disdain, stopping especially on Lily with an expression that mixed irritation and something close to disgust. "This is Mary's daughter?" Gerald asked. "The girl is much smaller than I expected." "Malnutrition," Robert replied coldly, "happens when mothers don't take good care of their children." The casual cruelty of the comment made Adrian step forward, but Ms. Rodriguez held his arm, silently reminding him that they needed to be strategic. "What do you want?" Adrian asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I want the documents that you came to get here," Robert said, holding out his hand. "And I want you three to disappear from my life forever." "What documents?" Ms. Rodriguez said innocently. "We don't know what you're talking about." Robert laughed, but it was a humorless sound. "Sylvia, you've always been an exemplary employee, but a terrible liar. I know Mary hid evidence before she left, and I know you came here to get it." It was at that moment that Lily stepped forward, her large eyes fixed on Robert's face. "Where's my mom?" "Your mother is where she deserves to be," Robert replied with disdain. "Far from here, working honestly for the first time in her life." "My mom has always worked honestly," Lily said, her voice small but firm. "The one who doesn't work honestly is you." "A child giving me moral lessons," Gerald laughed. "What a joke." "It's not a joke," Lily said, surprising everyone with her seriousness. "I know things that you don't know I know." Robert leaned forward, interested despite himself. "What kind of things?" "I know that you offered my mother money to keep quiet. I know that you and the fat man," she said, pointing to Gerald, "were stealing money from public works. And I know that you lied about Uncle Adrian to everyone in town." The second major twist began when Lily took out of her pocket a small recorder that no one had noticed before. "And I know that you just confessed several bad things here in this apartment." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert and Gerald looked at each other, realizing too late that they had fallen into a trap set by a 4-year-old girl. "Where did you get that?" Robert asked, his voice losing all its previous confidence. "My mom always said that when adults do bad things, we need to have proof," Lily said simply. "I found this recorder in her things and learned how to use it." Adrian and Ms. Rodriguez looked at Lily with a mixture of admiration and astonishment. The girl had orchestrated a confession without anyone noticing, using Robert's own arrogance against him. "That doesn't prove anything," Gerald said nervously. "It's just the word of an abandoned child against ours." "It's not just my word," Lily said, and then did something that left everyone speechless. "Ms. Rodriguez, can you show them the papers we found?" Ms. Rodriguez took from her bag the envelope with all the documents that Mary had hidden. Original contracts, compromising photographs, detailed notes, and above all, the written confessions that Mary had made before being forced to leave town. "Your mother documented everything," Ms. Rodriguez said to Robert. "Every suspicious meeting, every diverted value, every threat you made. And the most interesting thing," she continued, taking out a specific letter, "is this confession from Gerald, admitting that you forced him to participate in the scheme by threatening to report him for tax evasion." Gerald paled. "That's a lie. I never wrote that." "No, you didn't write it," Ms. Rodriguez agreed. "But Mary heard you saying it on the phone with your wife when you were desperate thinking about how to get out of the scheme. She wrote down everything, word for word." The third and greatest final twist came when Lily revealed something that completely changed the course of the situation. "And there's one more thing you don't know," she said, looking directly at Robert. "My mum isn't alone in the city where you sent her." "What do you mean?" Robert asked, a chill growing in his stomach. "She met other people who were forced to leave their towns because of schemes similar to yours. And they're all gathering evidence." Lily took out of the envelope a paper that no one had noticed before, a recent letter dated just 2 weeks ago. "My mom managed to send this letter to Mrs. Davis, asking her to take care of me until she could come back. But in the letter, she says that she discovered that you did the same thing with other families in other cities." Adrian read the letter over Lily's shoulder, and what he saw shocked him. Mary had discovered that Robert operated a scheme much larger than anyone imagined, moving problematic employees between different cities to keep them quiet and controlled. "My mum wrote that she has proof of at least 5 other families who were separated in the same way," Lily continued, "and that they're all working together to expose you." Robert staggered, leaning against the wall. His local corruption scheme had turned into a network of blackmail and manipulation that spanned several cities, and now his own victims were organizing against him. "This can't be true," he murmured. "It's true," Lily said with the conviction of a child who had learned to distinguish truth from lie in the hardest possible way. "And now, all those people are going to come home, and everyone will know what you really did, including your mother," added Ms. Rodriguez gently. "Mary is already on her way back. She should arrive tomorrow morning." Lily's eyes filled with tears of joy. "My mom is coming back. She's coming back, my dear. And you'll never need to be apart again." Gerald, realizing that the situation had become unsustainable, began to head towards the door. "Robert, I wasn't part of any of this. You forced me." "Where do you think you're going?" said a familiar voice from the door. Everyone turned to see Mary Thompson entering the apartment. She was thinner, with a few grey hairs that she didn't have before, but her eyes shone with the determination of a mother who had finally found a way to return to her daughter. "Mom!" Lily cried, running into Mary's arms. The reunion between mother and daughter was so emotional that even Robert was silent, watching the scene with an expression that mixed defeat and perhaps a glimmer of regret. "Robert," Mary said, still embraced with Lily, "it's time for you to account for what you did, not only to me and my daughter, but to all the families you destroyed." And in that small apartment where it had all begun, with a 4-year-old girl who had proven smarter than any adult, the truth was finally coming to light, promising justice and, most importantly, the chance for a family to reunite. The silence in the small apartment was as heavy as lead. Mary held Lily in her arms, the two of them looking at each other as if trying to memorize every detail of each other's faces after months of forced separation. Robert remained leaning against the wall, his previous arrogance replaced by an expression of growing defeat, while Gerald nervously moved towards the door, clearly planning a desperate escape. "You're not going anywhere, Gerald," Mary said firmly, blocking his path. "You have a lot to explain too." "Mary, how did you come back?" Adrian asked, still processing the unexpected presence of the woman. "I thought Robert blackmailed me, that's true," she replied, stroking Lily's hair. "He said that if I didn't leave town and keep quiet about what I discovered, he would fabricate evidence that I was stealing from the company, that Lily would be put in an orphanage and I would be arrested." "Then why did you agree to leave?" asked Mrs. Sylvia. "Because he showed me false documents that incriminated me, forged invoices, receipts with my signature faked," Mary explained, her voice trembling with suppressed anger. "He had prepared everything in advance. He said that if I stayed, not only would I be harmed, but my daughter would suffer the consequences." Lily moved slightly away from her mother's embrace to look directly at Robert. "Why are you so mean? Why did you separate me from my mom?" The simple and direct question from a 4-year-old child hit Robert harder than any formal accusation. He looked at that fragile girl who had spent months living on the streets because of his actions, and for the first time in years felt something akin to genuine guilt. I didn't want things to get to this point," he muttered, avoiding Lily's piercing gaze. "That's a lie," Mary said. "You planned everything carefully, including the part about keeping me under surveillance in the other city." "What do you mean, surveillance?" Adrian asked. "The job he got for me was at a factory where the supervisor was his friend. I was constantly watched. I couldn't make personal calls. I couldn't leave town on weekends. It was practically a disguised prison." Gerald, sweating profusely, finally found the courage to speak. "Robert, you said it would only be for a few months, that everything would go back to normal afterwards." "Shut up, Gerald," Robert exploded, realizing that his accomplice was about to reveal even more compromising details. "No, let him speak," Lily said with frightening maturity. "People who do bad things always tell the truth when they're scared." Miss Sylvia was once again impressed by the girl's insight. "Gerald, what else did Robert promise you?" "He said the scheme would only last until we got enough money to retire," Gerald confessed, the words tumbling out in a torrent. "That afterwards we would return everyone to their cities and no one would know anything." "But that wasn't true, was it?" Mary insisted. "No! He was planning to expand the scheme to other regions. He wanted to turn it into a permanent business, moving workers and their families like chess pieces." The fourth mean twist was revealed in all its cruelty. Robert wasn't just siphoning money from public works projects, he was building a network of human control, separating families and manipulating entire lives to keep his scheme running. "How many other families?" Adrian asked, horrified. "At least 8 that I know of," Gerald said, ignoring Robert's furious glances. "Employees from different companies, people who discovered irregularities. Robert had contacts in several cities who helped relocate these people." "And the children?" Mary asked, squeezing Lily tighter. "Some went to distant relatives, others—" Gerald swallowed hard. "Others were placed in institutions." The horror of the revelation filled the apartment. Lily had been lucky to escape and survive on the streets on her own. Other children had been separated from their parents and sent to places where they would never see them again. "Monster!" Miss Sylvia whispered, looking at Robert with disgust. "How could you sleep at night knowing what you were doing?" Robert finally exploded, all his composure vanishing. "You don't understand. I built an empire. I had money in stocks, investments in bitcoins, assets in dollars. I was creating wealth, generating jobs, destroying families," Mary completed coldly. "It was a necessary evil. These people were obstacles to business growth. These people were human beings," Adrian said, finally understanding the full extent of his ex-partner's monstrosity. People with children, dreams, lives of their own. Like my mom, Lily added, her voice small but firm. She just wanted to work honestly and take care of me. Robert looked at the girl, and something in his face changed. Maybe it was the accumulated weight of his actions, or maybe it was the cruel innocence of that child who had survived the consequences of his crimes. But for the first time, he seemed truly repentant. "Lily," he said hesitantly, I didn't want you to suffer." "But I did suffer," she replied simply. "I suffered a lot of hunger, a lot of cold, a lot of fear. And it wasn't just me. Other children also suffered because of what you did." I know, and I—" Robert paused, struggling with words he had never said before. "I'm sorry." "Being sorry doesn't bring back the time I lost away from my mom," Lily said, "but it can help other families come home." Mary looked at her daughter with pride and amazement. At 4 years old, Lily had developed an understanding of justice and forgiveness that many adults would never achieve. "Robert," Mary said, "you are going to help reunite all the families you separated. You are going to return the money you stole, and you are going to turn yourself into the authorities. And if I don't do that, then we'll do it for you," Miss Sylvia replied, shaking the envelope with all the evidence. "We have documents, recordings, witnesses. We have everything we need to expose not only what you did here, but your entire network in other cities." Robert looked around the small apartment, seeing the determined faces of people he had underestimated. A fired employee who had become a tenacious investigator, an ex-partner who had discovered his true nature, a mother who had survived the forced separation from her daughter, and most importantly, a 4-year-old girl who had proven smarter and braver than anyone imagined. "I will cooperate," he said finally, his voice defeated. "I will help reunite the families. I will return the money. I will tell everything to the authorities. And you will apologize to every person you hurt," Lily added. "My mom always said that when we do something wrong, we have to apologize sincerely." Robert nodded, looking at that child who had been his victim and now became, in a way, his redeemer. "I will apologize to everyone." Mary stood up, still holding Lily in her arms. "Then it's decided. Tomorrow morning, we'll go to the authorities together." "Together," Adrian agreed, feeling for the first time in months that maybe there was a path to redemption. "Together," repeated Miss Sylvia, carefully storing the documents that had become the key to justice. And Lily, nestled in her mother's arms, smiled for the first time since it all began. Not because justice was being done, but because she was finally home, where she should always have been. The next morning brought with it a mixture of relief and apprehension. Mary had spent the entire night awake, simply watching Lily sleep on the small mattress she shared with her, trying to absorb the reality that her daughter was finally safe in her arms. The girl, exhausted by months of tension and survival on the streets, slept soundly for the first time since her mother's disappearance. "Mommy?" Lily murmured as she woke up, opening her big eyes and for a moment seeming confused, as if she couldn't believe it was all real. "I'm here, my little one," Mary said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "And I'm never leaving again." Outside the apartment, Adrian paced nervously on the sidewalk. He had spent the night in the small town hotel, but sleep had been impossible. In a few hours, he would have to face the local authorities, admit his partial involvement in Robert's scheme, and hope that his cooperation would be enough to avoid more serious consequences. Miss Sylvia arrived punctually at 8 in the morning, carrying a reorganized folder with all the evidence meticulously catalogued. Her administrative experience had been crucial in transforming the chaotic discoveries of the previous night into a solid and presentable case. "How is she?" she asked Mary when she entered the apartment. "Better, stronger than I imagined possible," Mary replied, watching Lily play quietly with some drawings she had made on papers found in the apartment. "She's grown a lot in these months." "Grown more than she should have," Miss Sylvia said sadly. "No child should have to go through what she went through." Lily approached the two women, carrying one of her drawings. "I drew a picture of all of us going to talk to the important people today," she said, showing an image where stick figures walked towards a large building. "Aren't you nervous?" Mary asked, hugging her daughter. "A little bit," Lily admitted. "But you always said that when we tell the truth, things get easier." When Adrian knocked on the door at 9 o'clock, he found a domestic scene that touched him deeply. Mary was carefully combing Lily's hair, preparing her for the important day that awaited them. It was an image of maternal normality that contrasted drastically with the months of separation and suffering they had endured. "How are you feeling?" he asked Lily. "I'm fine. How about you?" "Nervous," Adrian admitted. "Very nervous." "It's normal to be nervous when we've done wrong things," Lily said with her brutal honesty. "But you didn't do the worst things." "The man, Robert, did the worst things. Even so, I should have paid more attention. I should have protected your mother and you." Lily was silent for a moment, considering his words. "But now you're trying to fix it, right? My mom always said that what matters isn't just not falling, it's getting up when we fall." The girl's precocious wisdom continued to impress Adrian. At 4 years old, Lily already understood concepts of redemption and second chances that many adults struggled to accept. Robert arrived at 9:30, accompanied by Gerald. Both seemed to have aged years overnight, the weight of their confessions clearly taking its toll. Robert avoided looking directly at Lily, while Gerald moved like a man walking to his own execution. "Are you ready?" Miss Sylvia asked, checking once again that she had all the necessary documents. "No," Robert said honestly. "But that doesn't matter anymore, does it?" The group headed to the local police station, a 15-minute walk through the cobblestone streets that Lily knew so well. During the journey, the girl held her mother's hand with a force that revealed that, despite her apparent maturity, she was still a child who had experienced significant trauma. "Mommy," she whispered as they walked, "if they arrest the man Robert, will the other children be able to go back to their mums too?" "We are going to try to make that happen, my dear," Mary replied. "We're going to work hard so that all the families can reunite again." At the police station, they were greeted by Chief Carlos Mendez, a 50-year-old man known for his integrity and for never accepting bribes, a reputation that had made him respected, but also feared by the less scrupulous businessmen in the region. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, rising to greet her, "I received your call last night. I understand we have a complex situation to resolve." "Very complex," she confirmed. "And it involves not only our city, but several others." The chief observed the group with special attention to Lily, who remained close to her mother, but watched everything around her with her big, attentive eyes. "This is the girl who was missing?" he asked gently. "I wasn't missing," Lily corrected. "I was lost because they separated me from my mom." The simple but powerful correction made the chief immediately understand that he was dealing not only with a case of corporate corruption, but with a situation that had caused real suffering to innocent families. During the next 2 hours, each member of the group gave their detailed testimony. Ms. Sylvia presented all the documentary evidence they had collected, from Mary's original notes to the compromising photographs and the falsified contracts. Mary recounted her experience of blackmail, forced separation, and the months of supervised work in the other city. Her voice remained firm throughout the testimony, but her hands trembled slightly whenever she mentioned the moments when she thought she would never see her daughter again. Adrian admitted his partial involvement in the scheme, explaining how he had indirectly benefited from the inflated profits without questioning their origin. His honesty about his own guilt impressed the chief, who was accustomed to businessmen trying to shift all responsibility to others. Gerald confessed his participation in the overbilling scheme and revealed details about how Robert coordinated the network of relocating problematic employees between different cities. When it was Robert's turn, he surprised everyone with the extent of his confession. He not only admitted all the crimes he was accused of, but also provided names, dates, amounts, and locations of all the other operations he coordinated in different regions. "Why are you being so cooperative?" the chief asked, suspecting some trick. Robert looked at Lily, who was sitting quietly next to her mother, drawing on a paper that the chief himself had given her. "Because a 4-year-old child made me realize that I had turned into something I never thought I would be," he said. "And because maybe, if I help reunite all the families I separated, I can sleep at night again." "Will it take long to reunite all the families?" Lily asked, raising her eyes from her drawing. "A few weeks, maybe a few months," the chief replied, "but we will work as quickly as possible." "And the stolen money?" she insisted. "It will also be returned," Robert promised. "I will liquidate all my investments, sell my stocks, convert my bitcoins, use all my assets to compensate the people I harmed." Lily nodded, satisfied, returning to her drawing. For her, justice was simple. Bad people should fix the bad things they had done, and families should stay together. When they finally left the police station, it was already mid-afternoon. The first step had been taken, but everyone knew that the process of reparation would be long and complex. "What do we do now?" Adrian asked. "Now," Mary said, picking up Lily, "we go back home and start living our life again. Together." "Forever?" Lily asked. "Forever," her mother promised, sealing with a kiss on the forehead, a promise that this time no one could break. The weeks following the testimony at the police station brought a routine of slow but constant healing for Lily and Mary. The small apartment that had witnessed so much pain was now gradually transforming into a real home again, with the girls' laughter echoing through the rooms that had been silent for months. Mary got a new job at a fabric store downtown, an honest job that allowed her to pick up Lily from daycare every day at 5 o'clock. It wasn't the same salary she received at Adrian's company, but it was enough to support them both with dignity, especially considering that Robert was fulfilling his promise of financial restitution. "Mommy, today the daycare teacher said that I'm very smart," Lily said one afternoon, while helping her mother prepare dinner. "She said that I know things that kids my age usually don't know." "You learned a lot of things you shouldn't have needed to learn, my little one," Mary replied, stroking her daughter's hair, which was now always clean and well-combed. "But that also made you strong." "I didn't want to be strong," Lily said thoughtfully. "I just wanted to be a kid." The honesty of the observation broke Mary's heart. She knelt down to be at her daughter's height, holding her small face in her hands. "Now you can be a kid again," she promised. "You can play, you can make friends, you can not worry about adult things." "But what if they try to separate us again?" "Never again," Mary said firmly. "We will never separate again." Adrian had become a constant presence in their lives, visiting them 2 or 3 times a week. He was facing his own legal consequences. He had been heavily fined and ordered to perform community service. But his full cooperation with the authorities had avoided jail time. More importantly, he had found a way to channel his guilt into positive actions. "Lily," he said during one of his visits, "I have a surprise for you." "What kind of surprise?" she asked, still slightly distrustful of promises made by adults. "Remember we talked about reuniting the other families who were separated like you?" "I remember. Did you manage to find them?" "We managed to find the first family, a 5-year-old girl named Anna, who was in an institution in Flagstaff, will be reunited with her parents next week." Lily's eyes lit up. "Really? She's going back to her mom and dad?" "She is." "And you know why we were able to find her?" "Why?" "Because of the information you gave us, the things you remembered and wrote down. Your special memory helped save another family." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing the information. Then a slow smile spread across her face, the first truly carefree smile that Adrian had seen from her. "Can I meet her when she goes back to her family?" "If she wants to, of course you can." Miss Sylvia had also found her own path to redemption. Using her administrative experience and her intimate knowledge of Robert's scheme, She had become a kind of volunteer coordinator of the family reunification process, working directly with authorities in different cities to locate and rescue other victims. "We have news," she announced during a visit to Mary's apartment. "We found 3 more families, one in Yuma, one in Prescott, and one in Cottonwood." "How many children?" Mary asked. 5 children in total, ages between 3 and 8, all separated from their parents for more than a year. Lily, who was playing on the floor with some simple toys that Adrian had bought for her, raised her head. "Are they sad like I was?" "Probably, my dear," Miss Sylvia replied gently, "but now they can be happy again, like you. Can I write a letter to them, to tell them that everything will be okay soon?" "You know how to write?" Miss Sylvia asked, surprised. "I'm learning at daycare, and my mum is teaching me at home too." Mary smiled proudly. "Lily is doing very well. The teacher said she has a natural knack for learning." "It's not a natural knack," Lily corrected. "It's because I really want to learn so I can help other people, like you help me." The maturity of the response still surprised the adults, but now they were beginning to see that there was something positive emerging from the terrible experience that Lily had lived through. She was developing an empathy and a determination that could make a significant difference in the lives of other people. During this period, Robert was strictly complying with all the terms of his cooperation. He had liquidated his considerable fortune, stocks, cryptocurrency investments, properties, to create a compensation fund for the affected families. More importantly, he was providing detailed information that allowed the authorities to dismantle the entire network of corruption and blackmail that he had built. "He wants to talk to you," Chief Mendez said to Mary during one of her visits to the police station to monitor the progress of the case. "Talk to me? Why?" "He said he needs to apologize personally to you and Lily." Mary hesitated. The idea of confronting again the man who had destroyed her life and traumatized her daughter was not attractive, but there was something in Robert's insistence that suggested genuine remorse. "Lily can decide," she said finally. "If she wants to hear his apology, I accept. If she doesn't want to, we won't." When they asked Lily, she was thoughtful for a long time. "Is he really sorry?" she asked. "He seems to be," Mary answered honestly. "And is he helping the other families reunite?" "He is." "Then I want to hear his apology, but only if you stay with me the whole time." "Of course, my little one. I'm never leaving your side again." The meeting took place in the visiting room of the police station, with Chief Mendez present as mediator. Robert entered wearing simple clothes, very different from the expensive suits he used to wear. His face was thinner, his hair graying, and he moved with the stooped posture of someone carrying an enormous weight. When he saw Lily sitting next to her mother, his eyes filled with tears. "Lily," he said, his voice breaking, "I want to apologize for what I did to you and your mother. I know that nothing I say can erase the suffering I caused, but I need you to know that I deeply regret everything." Lily observed him with her big, serious eyes, studying his expression as she did with all adults, since she learned that not all of them were trustworthy. "Do you really feel sorry?" she asked. "I feel it more than I can express." "And are you helping the other children?" "I'm doing everything I can to reunite all the families I separated." Lily nodded slowly. "Then I accept your apology, but there's one condition." "What?" "When all the children are back with their families, you have to promise that you will never again do things that separate mothers from their children." "I promise," Robert said, his voice choked. "I solemnly promise." "And there's something else," Lily continued. "You have to use the money that's left over to help other children who don't have a mother or father, so they don't have to sleep on the streets like I did." Robert looked at that 4-year-old girl who had transformed her personal trauma into compassion for future victims, and understood that he was facing someone who had found a way to turn suffering into wisdom. "I will do that too," he promised. "I will create a foundation to help abandoned children." "Then it's okay," Lily said, getting up from her chair. Now I'm going home with my mom." And with that simple statement, a 4-year-old girl who had survived abandonment, hunger, and fear ended a terrible chapter of her life and prepared to write a new one, where family, safety, and love were not fragile luxuries, but inalienable rights that she would make sure to protect forever. 3 months after the final confrontation in the apartment, the small town of Sedona was preparing for an event that would forever mark the memory of its inhabitants. The central square, where Lily had slept so many lonely nights on the cold park bench, was now decorated with colorful banners and balloons, transformed into a place of celebration for the great reunion of the families separated by Robert's scheme. "Mommy, I'm nervous," Lily confessed as Mary adjusted her new dress, a gift from Miss Sylvia for the special occasion. "What if the other children don't like me?" "Why wouldn't they like you, my little one?" Mary asked, kneeling down to be at her daughter's height. "Because I know bad things, because I had to learn to be big too early. The other children might find that strange." Mary felt her heart clench as she realized that even after months of care and love, Lily still carried deep insecurities about her place in the world. "My dear, these children went through the same thing as you. They will understand you better than anyone else." "Really? Really? And besides, you are not defined by the bad things that happened to you. You are defined by your courage, your kindness, and by the way you helped other families reunite." Adrian arrived early to pick them up, driving a simple car he had bought to replace his old BMW, part of his personal changes for a more modest and meaningful life. He had lost a lot of weight in recent months, a result of both the legal stress and his new routine of volunteer work, but his eyes had a light that they didn't possess during his days of questionable wealth. "How is our heroine today?" he asked Lily, referring to the nickname she had earned in the local community. "I'm not a heroine," Lily protested, as she always did when someone used that word. "I just did what I had to do." "Exactly what a heroine does," Adrian insisted with a smile. In the square, a crowd had gathered. In addition to the locals curious to meet the families who would return home, there were journalists from neighboring cities, municipal authorities, and above all, the families who had been victims of Robert's scheme. The first family to arrive was that of Anna, the 5-year-old girl who had been institutionalized in Flagstaff. When she got out of the official car that brought her along with her parents, her eyes immediately searched for Lily in the crowd. "Are you Lily?" Anna asked timidly, approaching. "I am. And you are Anna, who was away from your mom and dad?" "I was. But now I'm back." The two girls looked at each other for a moment, recognizing in each other the shared experience of suffering and separation. Then, spontaneously, they hugged, and in that simple gesture, the entire crowd present understood the magnitude of what had been lost and recovered. "Thank you," Anna's father said to Lily, his words filled with emotion. "My daughter told me that it was because of your information that they were able to find us." "I just remembered the things I saw," Lily replied, still hugging Anna. "Anyone would have done the same thing." "No," Anna's mother said, kneeling down to be at the height of the two girls. "Not just anyone would have had the courage to face dangerous adults to protect other children." In the following minutes, the other families arrived. Joanna, 3 years old, who had stayed with distant relatives in Yuma while her parents were forced to work in questionable conditions in another city. Pedro and Miguel, twin brothers of 6 years old, who had been separated not only from their parents, but from each other, living in different foster homes. Each reunion was a scene of pure emotion. Parents who had spent months without knowing if they would see their children again. Children who had lost hope of having a family again, all reuniting under the late afternoon Arizona sun, in the same square where Lily had spent so many nights wondering if her mother would return. "How many families did we manage to reunite in total?" Mary asked Ms. Sylvia, who coordinated the event with military efficiency. 8 complete families involving 15 children, Ms. Sylvia replied proudly. And we still have 3 cases in progress that should be resolved in the next few weeks. And Robert, did he fulfill all the promises? All. The compensation fund guaranteed psychological treatment for all the children, financial support for the families during the period of readjustment, and there was still enough money left over to create the foundation that Lily suggested. The Lily Thompson Foundation, Adrian said, approaching the 2 women. Robert insisted that it bear her name. Does she know that? Mary asked. Not yet. I thought I'd tell her during the speech. The moment of the speech arrived when all the families were gathered. The mayor of the town made a brief speech about justice and community. Chief Mendez explained how the investigation had unfolded, and then it was Adrian's turn to speak. A few months ago, he began, his voice echoing through the square through the improvised sound system. I was a man who believed that money and financial success were the most important things in life. I had investments in stocks, applications in bitcoins, a wealth that grew constantly, but I was blind to the suffering that my negligence was causing. He paused, looking directly at Lily, who was sitting in the front row next to her mother. It was a 4-year-old girl who taught me that true wealth is not measured in dollars or euros. It is not counted in profits or dividends. True wealth is measured in the love we share, in the families we protect, in the courage we have to do what is right, even when it is difficult. The crowd applauded, but Adrian hadn't finished yet. Therefore, I want to announce that the remaining resources recovered from the scheme will be used to create the Lily Thompson Foundation, dedicated to protecting children in vulnerable situations and ensuring that no family is separated by greed or negligence again. Lily got up from her chair, her big eyes widening in surprise. A foundation with my name? A foundation with your name, Adrian confirmed, because it was you who taught us that protecting children is the most important thing that adults can do. But I don't want a foundation with my name, Lily said, her voice carrying a maturity that impressed everyone. I want a foundation with the name of all the children who suffered, so that no one forgets that behind every bad scheme, every wrong thing that adults do, there are always children who suffer. Lily's suggestion was received with enthusiastic applause from the crowd. There was a girl who had survived abandonment, hunger, and fear, and her first concern was not with personal recognition, but with the protection of other vulnerable children. Then it will be the All Children Foundation, Adrian announced, moved. And Lily Thompson will be its first volunteer ambassador. Can I do that even being small? Lily asked. You've already proven that size doesn't matter when it comes to making a difference, Ms. Sylvia replied. As the event came to an end and the families began to disperse, something beautiful happened. The children who had been reunited with their parents spontaneously formed a circle around Lily, each wanting to personally thank the girl who had helped bring their families back. Lily, Anna said, holding her hand, when I grow up, I want to be brave like you. When I grow up, said Pedro, one of the twins, I want to help other children like you helped me. When I grow up, said Joanna, the youngest of the group, I want to remember everything like you remember, to protect other people. Lily looked at all those children who had gone through experiences similar to hers, and for the first time since it all began, felt that maybe there was a purpose in all the suffering they had lived through. When you grow up, she said, you will be even braver than me, because you will know how to protect other children, so they never have to go through what we went through. At that moment, under the stars that were beginning to appear in the Arizona sky, a new generation of protectors was being born, children who had known the worst of human nature, but who had chosen to respond with hope, courage, and an unwavering commitment to ensuring that other children never experienced the same pain. And at the center of it all, Lily Thompson, the 4-year-old girl who had begun that journey sleeping alone on a park bench. was now surrounded by an extended family of brave children and redeemed adults, knowing that she would never be alone again. 1 year after the great reunion in Central Square, life had found a new rhythm for all the families involved in the story. The All Children Foundation was functioning at full speed, already having helped dozens of children in vulnerable situations. Lily, now 5 years old, regularly attended school and had become a kind of child ambassador for the foundation, always closely accompanied by her mother. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon when Mary received an unexpected call that would change everything once again. On the other end of the line was Dr. Robert Fernandez, a lawyer from Phoenix who worked with adoption and paternity cases. "Mrs. Thompson, I need to talk to you about a very delicate matter related to your daughter Lily," he said, his voice cautious. "What kind of matter?" Mary asked, feeling a familiar chill run down her spine. "I prefer to explain in person. Can I visit you tomorrow? Tell me at least what it's about. I've been through too much with my daughter to accept surprises." The lawyer hesitated. "It concerns Lily's father. We have information about him." Mary almost dropped the phone. During all these years, she had kept the identity of Lily's father a secret, mainly because the man himself never knew of his daughter's existence. It was a chapter of her life that she preferred to keep closed. "How did you find out?" she murmured. "During the investigation of Robert's scheme, we found some old documents from the company where you worked. Documents that mention the name of Lily's father." The next day, Dr. Fernandez arrived at the small apartment carrying a voluminous folder. Mary had asked Miss Sylvia to stay with Lily during the conversation, sensing that it would be something she needed to process before sharing with her daughter. "Lily's father is Edward Sterling," the lawyer said directly, observing Mary's reaction. "Yes, I know who he is," she replied calmly. "But how did you get to him?" "Edward Sterling is Adrian Sterling's brother." The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Mary felt as if the floor had disappeared from under her feet. During all these months, Adrian had taken care of her daughter, protected them both, helped rebuild their lives without knowing that Lily was his niece. "That's not possible," she murmured. "Edward worked at the brothers' company for a brief period, about 6 years ago." "That's when you met, correct?" Mary nodded slowly. Edward had been a kind, intelligent man who worked in the engineering department. They had had a brief but intense relationship until he received a job offer abroad that he couldn't refuse. When Mary discovered she was pregnant, Edward had already left for Europe, and she never managed to contact him. "Where is he now?" she asked. "He's returning to the United States next week. He received a telegram about the situation and is coming immediately." "Does he know about Lily?" "He found out 3 days ago. And according to what he told me on the phone, he really wants to meet his daughter." Mary covered her face with her hands, trying to process the magnitude of the revelation. Not only would Lily finally meet her father, but she would discover that Adrian, the man who had become a father figure to her, was actually her biological uncle. "How am I going to explain this to her?" Mary asked. "I suggest you talk to Adrian first," the lawyer said. "He will also be shocked by the discovery." That afternoon, Mary called Adrian asking him to come to the apartment urgently. When he arrived and heard the revelation, he remained motionless for several minutes, processing the implications. "My brother," he murmured finally. "Edward is Lily's father." "And you are her uncle," Mary completed. "That's why," Adrian said slowly. "That's why I felt such a strong connection with her from the first moment. That's why she trusted me when she had no reason to trust any adult. What do we do now?" Adrian looked out the window, seeing Lily playing in the small yard with some neighborhood children. "Now we tell her the truth. She deserves to know who her real family is." When they called Lily into the house, she immediately noticed the tension in the air. Her big eyes scanned the faces of the adults, reading their expressions as she had learned to do to survive. "Did something bad happen?" she asked. "No, my little one," Mary said. sitting down at her daughter's height. "In fact, something very special happened. We found out who your daddy is." Lily's eyes widened. "My real daddy. Your real daddy. And there's one more very special thing." "What?" Adrian approached, kneeling next to Mary. "Lily, your daddy is my brother. That means I'm your real uncle, not just uncle in my heart." Lily was silent for a long moment, her eyes going from Mary to Adrian and back. Then something that seemed like understanding shone on her face. "Is that why I felt like I could trust you that day on the barbed wire fence?" she asked. "Maybe," Adrian replied, moved. "Maybe your heart knew something that our minds didn't know." "And is my daddy going to come meet me?" "He's arriving next week," Mary confirmed. "He was working very far away in another country and didn't know you existed, but as soon as he found out, he decided to come home." "Will he like me?" "He will love you," Adrian promised. "Just like I love you. Just like your mother loves you." Lily processed all this information with the seriousness that had become her trademark. "Does that mean I have an even bigger family now?" "It means exactly that," Mary said, hugging her daughter. "And are you all going to stay with me forever?" "Forever," Mary and Adrian promised in unison. A week later, at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, Lily held her mother's hand firmly as they waited for Edward to arrive. Adrian was beside them, nervous about seeing his brother after so many years, but mostly anxious to see the reunion between father and daughter. When Edward came out of the arrival gate, Lily recognized him immediately. He had the same green eyes that she saw in the mirror, the same delicate bone structure, the same shy smile that she made when she met new people. "Lily," Edward said, approaching cautiously. "Daddy," she replied, her voice small but full of hope. The meeting between father and daughter was silent but intense. Edward knelt down to be at Lily's height, studying every detail of her face as if trying to memorize years lost in seconds. "You are even more beautiful than I imagined," he said, tears running down his face. "And you are exactly how I dreamed you would be," Lily replied. At that moment, under the fluorescent lights of the airport, a family was finally completed. Not only had Lily found the father she had never known, but she had discovered that all the threads of her life connected in ways that fate had carefully orchestrated. Edward had returned not only to meet his daughter, but to stay. He had accepted a position at the new company that Adrian was building, a company focused on social projects and affordable housing, funded by the resources recovered from Robert's scheme. "Do you know what this means?" Lily asked her mother months later, when they had all settled into a larger house that comfortably accommodated the extended family. "What, my little one?" "It means that sometimes the bad things that happen to us are the way for the good things to arrive." "How so?" "If the man Robert hadn't done the bad things, I would never have met Uncle Adrian. If I hadn't met Uncle Adrian, I would never have discovered that my daddy existed. And if all this hadn't happened, we would never have created the foundation to help other children." Mary looked at her daughter, now 6 years old, and saw a wisdom that surpassed any chronological age. Lily had transformed trauma into growth, suffering into compassion, and abandonment into a family stronger and more united than many people managed to build in a lifetime. "You're right," Mary said, hugging her daughter. "Sometimes the path to happiness passes through very difficult places. But what matters is that we don't give up," Lily completed, "and that we always, always protect the people we love." That night, as Lily slept safely in her own room, surrounded by a family that loved her unconditionally, the stars shone over the small town of Sedona, where it had all begun. And in Central Square, where a 4-year-old girl had spent lonely nights dreaming of her mother's return, there was now a small monument with a simple plaque, "In memory of all the children who wait, and in honor of those who never give up waiting." True wealth, after all, was not measured in assets or investments. It was measured in love, courage, and the ability to transform life's worst experiences into the foundations for a better future. If you liked this wonderful story, please comment. Your opinion is very important, and if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.